For the last half hour, I've been talking to Alexis Ohanian, co-founded Reddit, is now the executive chair. And when we come back, we've got Kash Nejatian, who is founder of a really awesome company called Kash. Thanks so much for tuning in, and we'll be back shortly.
You're listening to Startup School Radio, powered by the Wharton School. Here again is Aaron Harris.
Welcome back to Startup School Radio on Business Radio, powered by the Wharton School, SiriusXM Channel 111. I'm your host, Aaron Harris. I'm a partner at Y Combinator, and we've been speaking with Alexis Ohanian, who's the co-founder and current executive chair at Reddit. Alexis, thanks so much for sticking around.
Sure thing.
I'm also really excited to welcome our next guest, Kash Nejatian. Kash is the CEO of the mobile payments startup Kash and is a Y Combinator alum. Kash, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us. You know, if you're thinking about starting a company or interested in startups, you should give us a call and ask any question you want of these guys. Our number is 844-WHARTON. That's 844-942-7866. And we actually have a caller just to get started with the top of the half hour. We have Rick from Washington. Rick, you're on the air.
Hey, how are you? Thanks for taking my call.
I'm doing great.
So I had a question for Alexis. Just I'm a big fan of Reddit, and the community is amazing, right? What you've done with them is it's incredible. And I mean, even the most recent thing you guys launched, upvoted, which is great. I hope I can hear it on Sirius someday too.
Thanks.
The thing that I wonder though about is like in building community and having such, the people that are on were so invested in it, and how do you balance that and keeping us happy with the business side of it, knowing that those two things don't always probably align?
That is a very good question. And I've got to know, Rick, which Washington are you in, the district or the state?
I know you're a Redskins fan, and I am in D.C.
All right. Okay. Well, then we can continue this discussion. No. Dude, it's a challenge. It's going to be something that is going to have to always be the decision we always make, whether it's about product or about business, is are we doing right by users? And that is the guiding principle. And we are going to figure out a way to grow Reddit into a very successful business that actually works with its users, doesn't hurt it. And I feel like, for so many of our peers, the answer is a really simple, like, harvest as much data as you can and show them as many ads as you can. And to me, that feels lazy. It's going to be harder, but every decision we make, we know has to be made with our users in mind because, as Aaron mentioned a little earlier, like, we have nothing without them, right? All of those 9,000 communities do not exist. They do not set the agenda for media without a ton of volunteers, just people making great stuff. So that's the guiding principle. And I can't say we have it all figured out, but I think things like Reddit Gold and the way we've handled advertising by respecting user privacy and being really, really tactful with it is an indication of where we're headed.
Sounds like a really tough balance to strike, and I guess one that's going to continue to be a challenge for a long time. Yes.
Yeah. But here's what is going for me, and I think the thing that is really exciting is more and more brands and companies are realizing that I know authenticity gets thrown around all the time. It's one of those buzzword bingo words, but people succeed, even businesses succeed on Reddit when they are being authentic, when they come correctly as humans. And for some reason, every other social media platform has trained people to be dicks. Like you would never walk into a room and just start shouting like, hey, try out my service, right? No one would do that in real life. And yet everyone does that all over the internet. The one place you can't really do that and succeed is Reddit. And if we can help train brands to be smarter and more authentic and if they buy ads, make them interesting. And when people comment on them, even if they're bashing your ad, join in the discussion like a human being and talk it out. Those are the companies we see doing extremely well. And I hope it can have just even a bigger impact on how companies think about branding themselves and marketing themselves.
Got it. Thanks. And thanks, Rick, for that question. Now I want to turn to Kaz. And Alexis, I hope you'll be able to stay with us for the rest of the time.
Oh, yes. I'm not going to miss this.
Yeah, pepper Kaz with questions. You are both Armenian, or at least Kaz.
I'm taking credit for him.
There you go.
He's more Armenian than I am, but yeah.
I mean, we're not drawing lines of who's more.
No,
who's less.
we need as many people on our team as possible.
But that actually brings me to the first thing I actually want to talk about. And Kaz, well, first, Kaz, I'll let you say a little bit about what it is that Kash does, because it's a pretty powerful idea around how people pay for things at stores. Right now, there's basically cash and there's credit cards. Mm-hmm. But you guys are Kash with a K. So what are we talking about here?
So the way people pay for things really hasn't changed much since the early 1900s. When you pay with a credit card, the system works almost exactly the same as it did when credit cards were first invented in a diner club in New York.
Is that why the first credit card was Diners Club?
Yeah,
it's actually in a dining club.
Oh.
Huh.
So even if you pay with Apple Pay, the system is literally identical to what it used to be. So an entire system is built basically like a telegraph system was. Mm-hmm. Someone calls someone else. The credit card transaction takes 13 or 14 steps.
Wait, 13 or 14 steps from the time you swipe a card?
Yeah, at least.
That seems silly.
At least. Yeah, and that's why there's so much fraud, and so it costs so much. Just in any transaction, if you have more people in it, it gets more expensive because there's more middlemen.
So I'm trying to understand why there are so many steps in there, right? I mean, if I pay for something with a check, right, that's a direct draw on my account. So why isn't it that simple?
Yeah, because when credit cards were invented, you couldn't just call up your bank account and know if you had money or not, right? Because there was no way to identify you as who you are. There was no way to check your bank account. So they end up creating this massive network of hub and spokes. So when the retailer swipes your card, there's a reason why a credit card has 20 digits. Mm-hmm. So it's 16 numbers plus expiry code. That's all it is. All the other stuff is just fake.
Even the secret little code?
Yeah, it's all fake.
Oh.
You can have your card stolen and money spent on it without the code for 90% of transactions. So,
wow.
That's why credit card fraud is so high, right?
That's why you have these massive breaches, because those credit card numbers themselves.
Yeah,
are
the numbers matter. If you have a $100 bill in your hand, and I know the number under the bill, that bill isn't mine.
Right.
If you have a credit card in your hand and I know there are 20 numbers, that credit card is now mine.
Huh.
And that's just a stupid way of doing things.
Doesn't sound terribly secure.
How much do the chips make a difference?
So chip and PIN makes actually a difference because it's two-factor authentication.
So it's the PIN
But in the US,
two-factor authentication, what is that?
So it's something you know and something you have is two-factor authentication. So that's in the broadest sense. Mm-hmm. So you have a credit card and you know a PIN, essentially. So it's not really two-factor, but it's close. It's multi-factor. But chip and PIN will never be broadly available in the U.S. because banks don't want it to be available in the U.S.
Mm-hmm. Why don't banks want us to be secure?
Banks make usually the third or fourth highest revenue source for any bank is credit cards. So they love credit card fees. So the average person in the United States is literally $400 a year poorer because Visa is a company.
Wow. They should start putting that on billboards.
That's a great ad. That sounds. What you're basically paying for is the convenience of having credit extended to you. Aren't you?
Well, no, not really, because most credit transactions aren't credit transactions. Most people pay their bills. Mm-hmm. So there's no actual credit.
No one really cares if it's 30 days out. That's not a material difference.
That's not a material difference in your income. What you're paying for is the convenience of not carrying bills. Mm-hmm. And you're not paying for it. Mm-hmm. The retailer is paying for it. So the price of your stuff...
So when you say the average person's $400...
because everything is more expensive.
Got it.
Everything is more expensive, so you're less well off. The example I like to use is Burger King. I think in 2013, Burger King in Illinois had a net margin of 2.5%. Their transaction fees were 2.8%.
So they lost
literally
money.
Credit card companies made more money off Burger King than Burger King franchisees made off Burger King.
Wow.
This is no one would design a system like this if they were designing it today. It is a monopoly that will just for sure collapse. And we at Kash with a K are the people who are going to destroy it.
How? That sounds like, everywhere you go, right, they pretty much accept credit card. Though if you're in the Bay Area, no one takes Amex. Yeah. But, you can use credit cards everywhere. It's the default method that most people use to pay. How do you break that cycle?
So it turns out most retailers hate credit card companies, and that's not unreasonable. I grew up behind a cash register. My family's in retail. And I remember if you walked into my store with an American Express, I would pretend the credit card machine was broken.
I've had that happen to me before.
I would just pretend, sorry, the machine went down. If that happens to you in a store, it's because you have a credit card people hate. You are costing people money by using that credit card.
And that's why you also see these signs in stores that say, credit card limit minimum $10, which is, they can't actually do that.
That violates Visa's terms in a lot of ways. So merchants are literally breaking laws or breaking regulations in order to get you to do something else. So
what percentage of I know you gave the Burger King example, but what percentage of a retail store's margin is eaten up by credit card fees?
So I'll give you quick serve. The quick serve restaurants are cafes, fast food, any place where you go to pick up food. I think the net margin across there's a big.
Oh, never mind. Sorry.
It's a big industry. The net margin across the entire chain in the U.S., across the entire industry, was I think 3.5% last year. Transaction fees were about 2.5%.
Holy cow!
Nice.
So let me give you an idea. We have a store. We have our first store outside San Francisco. It's a store in Oregon called Stackhouse Coffee. They do about 30% of their transactions through Cash with a K, our product. Before us, they did 80% of
30% of all transactions.
All transactions through us.
Every dollar that passes through the store, a third of that dollar is you.
Yeah.
That's
How long
incredible.
have you been there?
About a couple of weeks, 2 weeks.
How in 2 weeks were you able to get a third of all their customers in a state you don't even live in to use your product?
It's our first store outside San Francisco. This is what happens. You walk into a store that has cash. The retailer will tell you, hey, we prefer if you pay with this app instead of your credit card. And because we prefer this, we'll give you cash back. We will give you loyalty points to use cash instead of a credit card.
Because we're talking about, 2/3 of their margin that they have to play with.
Yeah, so a retailer can give you significant cash back. So if you go to a cash store, you'll get 5-10% cash back to avoid paying with a credit card. So it's good for you, and it's good for a retailer. And it creates a real community between you and the retailer, as opposed to you and your bank and the retailer's bank and all the middlemen in between.
So what are you? A lot of people are talking about Apple Pay. They released it a few, 6 months ago. Now the iWatch is coming out, and people are talking about Apple Pay again. And you said that Apple Pay is essentially just the credit cards.
Yeah.
But you're just talking about an app that lets you pay. What's the difference here? What are you doing that's so revolutionary that stores really want you this badly?
So we don't use a credit card network. When you pay with cash, we withdraw the money directly from your bank account and give it to the retailer. And because we avoid the 13 or 14 middlemen in between, we can cut costs down by a lot. So we charge retailers a flat fee of 50 basis points, so 0.5%, compared to 3.5%, 4% for credit cards.
It's a huge savings.
Wow.
So stores that use us literally see their margins go up by 40, 50, 60%.
And here's the thing, though, right? You're basically counting on these retailers to sell you to their customers.
Yeah.
Now I'm thinking back. So I made that comment about my mobile menu, which was my ill-fated way to skip lines at fast food kind of restaurants. In trying to imagine getting a restaurateur to hustle someone else's product, especially software, that's a huge ask.
Yeah.
And so at the end of the day, does this when you have this meeting? Are you just like, hey, look, all those fees, they're gone now? They are so excited about this purely because they know how much money they're saving and how much that means for their bottom line?
Yeah. Let me give you an example. We have a store. It's two things, to be honest with you. One is the structure of the credit card system. So we have a store where I was talking to her 3 weeks ago. It's a local coffee shop, and I won't name it because the story is really sad. And the lady who ran the store is on the verge of closing it because of her credit card fees. She has such high credit card fees that she is literally losing money running the store every day. So last time I spoke to her, she was on the verge of tears because of her fees. The second thing is the people who usually sell credit card fees, because Visa isn't a big company, and banks don't actually sell credit card fees. They hire a whole bunch of people who are...
What do you mean Visa isn't a big company?
Visa is just a router. Visa is essentially a people who just does the handoff. Visa doesn't sell credit card processing to customers.
Got it. So you mean there's not a ton of employees? They don't have reach?
No, it's a $120 billion company, but it doesn't have...
Which is pretty big, by the way.
Yeah. Well, it's not as big as Reddit's going to be soon. So
Nice. Or Cash will be one day.
hopefully. But people who sell it have an incentive to increase your fees. The guy who comes to a retailer and says to you, I will give you credit card processing, is on commission. So they have an incentive to actually increase your fees, which happens all over the place. So they have hidden fees. No retailer can tell you what their fees are.
It doesn't just look like, hey, I've signed this contract, every X% of sales goes to this person?
No, because when you walk into a retail store, they can't tell what the charge on your credit card is. Not all. Visa has, I think, 25 or 30 different charge buckets, and all the banks have different fees. So when you have a credit card that has 2% cash back, someone's paying for that. Right. In an indirect way, it's you. You're paying for it yourself. But
so we're talking about basically this massive tax on small business owners.
Yeah.
Right? People who probably don't have the time or even like the in-depth legal understanding necessary to parse these contracts and see what they're actually paying.
Yeah, exactly.
And so
that's pretty crappy.
There has been so much advancement on the consumer side, right? Between Apple Pay, Square, right? I get to feel like a wizard whenever I buy a latte now. Mm-hmm. But it's all been happening on the consumer side. And so what you're saying is on the back end, the guts of it that actually affects the merchants still sucks just as badly as it did before.
Yeah, it hasn't changed in any significant way. I mean, look, they now run better modems, but it hasn't changed. The structure is still the same as it was when credit cards first came out. It hasn't changed in 70, 80 years. And that's why you have these massive breaches, right? So TJX, which was the largest credit card breach in history, before Target was the largest credit card breach in history, before Home Depot was a lot. These
it just keeps going up and up because it's such a big pot of honey.
And you keep trying to make better doors, but they don't have walls. So you can make it as good as you want and as electronic as you want.
That's a crazy metaphor.
Yeah, the problem is that there's like massive loops, massive holes that cannot be fixed. They are not fixable. So the whole system will collapse on its own weight.
So we'll talk a little bit about more of how bad the credit card processing system is and how Kash is going to save the world of retail in just a second. But if you're just tuning in, I want to say thank you for tuning in and welcome to Startup School Radio. I'm your host, Aaron Harris, broadcasting live on the business radio channel powered by Wharton on SiriusXM. If you're just joining us, we're talking to Alexis Ohanian, the co-founder and current executive chair of Reddit, and Kash Nejatian, the co-founder and CEO of Kash. We were just talking about the tax that credit card systems impose on retailers and effectively on every American because pricing goes up when this tax exists. And Kash has built a system that eliminates those fees. And so you were saying that you basically just directly debit from people's accounts. So you were just talking about credit card breaches. So, these massive breaches where hackers are stealing. I think they sold 50 million credit card records from Home Depot or something like that.
Yeah.
So one of the reasons that people like credit cards have, prevalence is they talk about anti-fraud, right? And you mentioned that it's not really that much. All you need is the number. But what are you doing? Like, how do you stop fraud? Because it could be a massive problem.
Yeah, so we don't actually, because we use the smartest computer that have ever existed, that's your mobile phone, that's on you all the time, we can do things that credit card companies just can't. For example, any token we use to pay for a transaction is only good for less than 50 seconds. So even if you manage to steal a token, you can only use it for 50 seconds at the location that the token was stolen.
So when you were talking about multi-factor authentication before, you have the number and another number, which are both static. Yeah. Here you have like this incredibly time-boxed and location-boxed sets of data that have to match up, otherwise nothing.
Yeah, and because we know who you are and where you are, we can protect you in a way that a credit card company can't. Because credit cards are so insecure, they have to create regulations to make sure credit cards can't be easily stolen. So when you swipe your credit cards, the person, the company who first gets it doesn't know who you are. They have no idea who you are. All they see is a bunch of numbers that they pass along. We know where you are. We know who you are. We know what you're buying. And because of those things, we can make a very secure system. And we don't allow for transactions to clear. But there's doubt. We haven't had a single case of fraud in the entire time the company's been up and running.
So how long have you been up and running? When did you start the company?
So we started a company a couple of years ago, but we went live in July.
What did you do for those years before you went live?
So we thought the best way to build a system that would beat the credit card companies was to build a point of sale. So we built a point of sale company and sold it to lots of people.
And sorry, what is a point of sale?
A point of sale is essentially a smart cash register that would allow. So we sold to a bunch of people. We had hundreds of stores using it. And then we were looking at the numbers, and it turned out no one was actually using it as a cash register. Everyone who was using it as a way to avoid credit card fees. So we said, well, the point of sale business is a fairly crappy business to be in. There's just a lot of people who were doing it better than us, but no one was doing payments better than us. So we applied to Y Combinator and said, look, we do this thing well. We're going to do this thing only. And that's what so we launched in July in San Francisco. And we're going to be leaving San Francisco in 2 weeks to go into our first market outside San Francisco.
Wow, what's your next? Well, you already have that store in Oregon.
We're following customers around literally. So when customers reach out to Kash, we follow them around. So we have lots of stores that have reached out from Portland. So we're going to Portland next.
And is that how you spread that one retailer tells their friends, like the other guys in the mall?
Yeah, our retailers are our best advocates. We don't have a big sales team. The retailers tell their friends and tell each other, and they come to us because they all know how the average mom and pop or the average store that has 19, 20 locations feels really powerless against a big bank. Mm-hmm. So they feel the pain. So as soon as they find a solution, they tell other people.
It sounds like you're doing something that I would say is Alexis's motto, which is make something people love, which is similar to YC's motto, which is make something people want.
I just remixed it.
You just remixed it. But that's, I mean, the idea that you had this company for a couple of years making this thing that you thought was the right answer, right? And then you saw, wait a second, they're using this for something we did not expect them to do. How do you have the confidence to make that change after investing years of your life in something to say, screw the business that we had, we're going to do this whole new thing, and we're going to just put all the chips on the table and do that? How do you do that?
Well, I mean, Alexis was building a mobile ordering company before he did Reddit, right? So, I think there are times when it feels weird. It feels completely unnatural that you've written, I don't know how many tens of thousands of lines of code we had written that we threw out. But it feels like you're kind of jumping off a bridge, hoping you'll build a parachute before you hit the ground. But that's what we did, because we knew we were not going to change the system that we hated so much by not being really good at this. Mm-hmm. And we knew we couldn't do everything else required to do it. And we knew that this was one thing we had latched onto. So it was a choice of building a company that was mediocre, that made some money, but ended up not affecting the world in a massive, significant way, or saying we're going to give up the revenue we had, we're going to give up this path to profitability that'll get us there, and instead we're going to go do this thing we're really passionate about. Everyone that works at our company is really passionate about hating the system as it exists. We think this system will collapse. Even if it's not us doing it, someone else will do it. This system is a bad system for the world. So we feel passionate about it. So it was easier that way.
I know what companies I'm shorting after this. I mean, the thing that really stirs my cocoa is we see a lot of founders. We advise a lot of founders. It is hard, right? We develop these egos around our creations, and I think it's the vast majority of founders would probably still be working on that point of sale device. The thing that I'm still trying to wrap my head around is just, okay, if this was so egregiously bad if it's this, and I believe that it's this reviled and this terrible and this insecure, how has it taken this long? Smartphones have been around for a minute.
Yeah.
How has it taken this long for Kash to exist, or for something like it to exist?
It's a couple of things. One, there's a lot of money behind the existing system. Like, a lot of people profit from this bad system existing. Mm-hmm. It's almost like net neutrality, right? A lot of big companies had a lot of lobbyists who made a lot of money, and a lot of lawyers who made a lot of money. I say this as a lawyer, but they made a lot of money making a bad system exist. And that's true. That's been the case. Every time someone has tried to make the payment system better, banks have tried to stop it. PayPal was sued left, right, and center by banks. So I think it is a matter of being an independent company that is not attached to the existing system, and that's why we can beat it.
You know, one of the things I wonder about when I talk to you, Kaz, about sort of this fight against injustice, and unfortunately we're not going to have enough time to go into it here, but You grew up in Tehran,
Yeah.
right, under a pretty oppressive regime, and you
Yeah.
left when you were a teenager.
Yeah.
Do you think that that's part of the inspiration? Like, you see this massive injustice and you want to fight it? Do you think that has anything to do with it?
I think so. I think it's that and growing up in a family of people who said, you know what, if something is not right, go fix it.
Yeah.
And we don't think this is right. We think it's bad for the world.
You know what? Thank you for doing something good for the world. And I'm not saying lawyers don't do good things. My wife is a lawyer, but there are huge things that you're tackling, and it's inspiring to hear you talking about it. I want to thank both of you for joining us on the inaugural Startup School broadcast. This was a really, really great conversation. We'll get you both back here because there's depths that we haven't even talked about, and a lot of stories I know are out there that our readers would love. Thank you all for tuning in to Startup School Radio. I'm your host, Aaron Harris. We've been broadcasting live from San Francisco, California, from Wharton's campus on Business School Radio, powered by SiriusXM. Be sure to tune in next week, where we'll be joined by Justin Kahn and Matilda Collin from Front. I'd also like to thank my senior producer, Lisa Montaneo, and associate producer and engineer, Dion Simpkins. Again, this is Aaron Harris. I'm a partner at Y Combinator, and this has been Startup School Radio. Thank you all, and have a great week.